Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they shout. Sometimes they steal or they wiggle about. They may obey or be out of control. They just 4, 5, 6, and 7 years old. You got to love our children. Love our children. You got to love our children and keep them learning in school. They've been suspended when they show disrespect. They've been suspended when they throw an object. They've been kicked out when they don't do as they're told. They act like 4, 5, 6, and 7 years old. We gotta love our children. You got to love our children. You got to love our children and keep them learning in school. Out of school may be the last resort, but the kids don't get help, they get no support. When they miss their lesson and get left behind, they're thrown into school to prison pipeline. Listen, what's all this talk about equity if you won't change your policy? Stop the stalling and the rigmarole. They're only 4, 5, 6, and 7 years old. You got to love our children. Love our children. You got to love our children and keep them learning in school. Yeah. Hey, you got to love our children. Love our children. You got to love our children and keep them learning in school. Yeah, I'm talking to you, school board.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Daniels, and I want to thank you all for taking time to join us this evening. I will be the facilitator for our conversation tonight, and this is part 2 in a discussion on out-of-school suspensions, specifically out-of-school suspensions with 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. So I'll begin our talk by introducing each of our panel speakers. Then I'll move into questions for our panelists. Afterwards, we'll take questions from the audience. So folks who are joining by Zoom, feel free to add your questions to the chat box. If folks are watching on Facebook Live, please feel free to add your questions there, and we'll try to get to everyone's questions. Before we wrap this evening, I will take time to ask each of our speakers to share at least one call to action, something that the viewers and audience members can do to affect change on this issue. First, I'll introduce myself. Again, my name is Ashley Daniels. I am a Southeastern North Carolina native. I have a background in advocacy and activism in environmental justice, social justice, and grassroots political organizing. I am also the owner of Speak Life Consulting. Next, we have Brother Abdullah Hafid bin Abdullah, the Executive Director of Sokoto House, the founder and director of Quality Life Blueprint, and co-founder of Community Healing Through Activism and Strategic Mobilization. Ms. Brenda Galloway, a community health worker in violence prevention with Sokoto House. Ms. Galloway is the founder of Hope, Helping Others Proceed Effectively. Ms. Veronica Mclauren Brown. Ms. Veronica has 34 years of experience in the New Hanover County Schools. She's worked with pre-K through 12 students and teachers as an educator, a building administrator, and as a special assistant to the superintendent for eliminating the achievement gap. And we have Ms. Jolanda Sidbury. Ms. Jolanda is a wife and mother of 2 boys, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. She teaches health and physical education to kindergarten through 8th grade students at DC Virgo, along with being the athletic director. She is the co-owner of That Power Game, a softball training and coaching business for young women in New Hanover, Brunswick, and surrounding counties. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
And I will pose the first question to Ms. Veronica. Ms. Veronica, you've shared before that broadly the work of Love Our Children is not a critique of the methods of individual educators, but in fact there are many educators who are doing the right thing in some of the schools. But that more specifically, there is a focus on a standardized method across the entire county is what you all are aiming for. So can you share for our viewers the mission of Love Our Children and why the standardized approach is so important?
I certainly can, thank you. We are focused on the policy. That's our single mission, is to add one sentence to the discipline policy for New Hanover County. And that one sentence says 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-old children will be excluded from suspension except for weapons, drugs, and serious bodily harm. We know that there are situations where we need to make sure that we're protecting the health and welfare of everybody, and we support that. But we also support the fact that young children, 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, pre-K to kindergarten, should remain in school for minor infractions such as subordination, disrespect, inappropriate language. Most of the infractions that children in our county are suspended for are not for guns. It's not for weapons. It's not for drugs. So we can do better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brother Abdullah, Dakota House addresses a broad range of social determinants through the programming and mentoring services. Why was this issue especially important for our community?
Thank you. So for Dakota House and the programs that we're trying to initiate, our concern is structural and interpersonal violence. I'm gonna say it again: preventing structural and interpersonal violence. And when I seen Love Our Children begin to campaign inside the city, and the first thing I noticed was that there was like this deafening type of echo. Like it was a clear issue that, made sense, right? But it was falling on deaf ears. So, and I'm thinking to myself, right, why? And I went to the school board meeting, I observed, I listened to a series of other issues that was being discussed in relation to a crisis within the educational setting. And what I understood was that the number one issue that was not being talked about, but really was the issue, was that whatever solution you come up with, right, there's going to need to be funding, right? Whatever you need to do to address, as Sister Veronica said before, turn the valve off, right, to the pipeway, right, to prison, to the pipeway to crisis, right, to the pipeway to mental health instability that we know is the outcome of children being removed from a place of safety, a place of capacity building, a place of loving, which is supposed to be the schools, right? If you're cutting them off, then you're leading them down an actual pathway to crisis, which we already see in our communities. And I'm saying to myself, the teachers are overworked. They're communicating that message very clearly. They're not being supported. They're experiencing vicarious trauma because of the trauma that the children are bringing into the room and the lack of support they're receiving inside the workplace. I'm hearing that inside that environment, children are being treated as if they're inside of ASEG, administrative segregation. They're put inside isolation rooms and being forced to kind of just work out their frustrations, right? I'm hearing other practices with school resource officers, right? And I'm hearing all these different things. And I'm saying to myself, well, Love Our Children is saying that we shouldn't be removing our children from these schools and abandoning them. But at the same token, if you keep them in the schools, right, you're keeping them inside of an environment that's already overwhelmed. So I said to myself, the thing that's missing here is the thing that Dakota House and what we're trying to achieve has been trying to prioritize in the city for going on 5-6 years. And that's identifying public health strategies and upstream approaches to address crisis in our community. And what I also understood is that recently, for whatever reason, right, I give credit to the Most High for it, is that because of the sale of the hospital, whether we know it's planned or not planned, produced a couple $2 billion, right? $1.2 billion for public health interventions placed inside of a foundation, $350 million placed inside the hands of the county. Then I'm also thinking okay, whoa, that's public health money. That's a lot of money, unprecedented money, right? But then you also have Healthy Opportunities pilot, right? An unprecedented act from Medicaid and Medicare to come and say that they want to actually prioritize non-clinical interventions to address social determinants, to address housing, to address food, to address transportation, and then to address interpersonal violence. Then I'm also hearing there's some other money left over, right, for I think the middle school, what's the E, is it EE?
Yes, sir. The ARP, sir, the funds that were for secondary. And
Exactly, what, 83 million? I don't know the name, I know it's 83 million, right? It's a lot of dollars, Sister Ashley. And what I'm saying is this, is that when I'm hearing a policy that's talking about a whole population, a whole generation of individuals, right, being supported, right, and being able to actually circumvent them being placed inside of an actual cycle that's going to lead to some form of crisis, to me, that's actual form of primary prevention, right? Primary prevention is a public health strategy, right? There's tons of public health money available. So what I said to myself, how can Sakota House support Peter, support Veronica, and making sure that what they bring to the actual table is saying, this is our immediate request. We understand everything else that's on the table, but we understand that we can achieve what we need to achieve while at the same token commanding or requesting support for all the other issues going on in our community because of the public health money that's available. So what Sakota House wanted to do is support bringing more visibility to a public health language and public health thinking as it relates to supporting our children, so that the question of there's no money to do this, right, we want to eliminate that question. And we want to make sure that community members, we want to make sure that actual community professionals understand that there is a way to actually silence this notion that there's no funding, because there is. So that's how Sakota House got involved, to address the structural determinant, right, that translates into other social conditions that's hurting our children and hurting our society as a whole. So that's how we got involved. That's why we're here. So I appreciate the question.
Indeed, thank you. This next question I'd like to pose to you, Ms. Galloway. I see on social media sometimes folks will talk about like how we have these expectations of our children that we ourselves can't even uphold as adults. And I know for myself, speaking for myself, I have some autonomy over what spaces I'm in, over what relationships I maintain, even to some degree what work I do, right? And we also know that children, just by default, have significantly less autonomy over their relationships, over where they have to be, and over how their lives are governed. I'm curious to know if you could speak to some of the issues in your, well, first of all, if you could speak to your background and your work at DC Virgo, and then some of the challenges that the children are facing outside of the school that might affect or impact their behavior inside a classroom.
Thank you. Okay. My role at DC Virgo was to be a support to the teachers, the staff, and to address behavior and academic needs of the youth that were selected through a multi-tier support system. And when the school staff actually had run their course with solutions, that's basically when I got a call in the beginning. And what I provided was, we had a classroom, we had a space where we could provide intervention, enrichments. We could have, what we had were, the children were labeled as high flyers, but they were the youth that had the most influence over the student body. And we had a class in the morning where we met with them so they could kind of hash out whatever was going on from the day before or the morning of, because their behavior basically set the stage for the student body behavior. And there was a need to foster the youth. So outside of school, every path they crossed affected their behaviors at school. Because in class, in the school, sometimes I would just show up in the classrooms, checking on the students, Now they were very excited to see me there because I knew some of their mothers and grandmothers, and they wanted to see somebody that looked like them that was going to stay around. Because one of the things they said when we met was that, "Hi, Miss Galloway." "Oh, well, she'll be gone too." So that was my fuel to stay in for and meet the challenge. There were a lot of unmet needs when children came to school. Some of them needed a change of clothes, needed hygiene, needed to bathe. Some were hungry. Some had conflict that they were dealing with still on their mind, so they were not focused at all. They were just in school because they just had to be there. So there were a lot of unmet needs present there that we were able to address inside of the school. So in order to work with a student, we had to get parental consent. So once we got that, I was able to go outside into the homes, because that's where the core issues were that they were bringing with them to the classrooms. You know, sometimes they were good students, but they were acting out, and we couldn't find out why inside of the school. So from the time they leave school on that bus, you know, it could be peer pressure or whatever. They could have needs that were not met, things they wanted to say while they were at school, but there was no platform for that. It was all about the program. Once they got off to school in the community, what social challenges did they face that would affect their behavior? When they got to the house, were they key latch children? Was there a meal prepared? Was there a parent home? Was there somebody to govern their homework or their schedule? You know, so we did a lot of after school activities, tried to have as many enrichments as we could out away from the home, because a lot of parents were working 2 jobs, for whatever reason parents could not do the math, so we had tutors provided for them. Just alternative after school programs actually influenced their behavior the next day, because they knew that there were certain things and behaviors they had to uphold in order to stay and come back in the program. And that's all they needed, was someone to support them, you know, and that's what I was there for. So.
Yeah, I said I just wanted to follow up with something, because Ms. Galloway listed a lot of questions about what they needed and what alternatives were after school. And what I'm saying is, what we're focusing on, that whole list of questions you asked about what's happened with them after school and how they're being addressed. Well, what Love Our Children is doing is focusing on the policies of the school and how they are addressed in a way that serve children.
Okay.
And we're saying that we know that suspension doesn't work. We know that it takes instructional time away.
Yes, it does.
We know that it provides, it adversely affects the school climate. We know that it breaks the bond between the adult and the child. And so the questions that you just asked about the community, we are asking about the school system, and they have full responsibility. They're paid professionals to answer that question. The school board policy, they have signed an ethical agreement saying that they understand that their first and their most important job is the welfare of those children and their education.
Exactly.
And so,
but I think the challenge you run into is this, is that, so everywhere you see incidences of overwhelming violence, you find food deserts, you find people living under the poverty line, you find people being displaced from their homes, you find over-policing, you find alcoholism, you find all these different things that these schools are dealing with. Right?
Yes.
And and lack of investment in the schools, right? So everywhere you see all those things we mentioned, if you go to those same places, it's those schools that also are not getting prioritized when it comes to building their infrastructure, right?
I agree.
So
Inappropriate funding.
Inappropriate funding, right? So the same policy, we got to keep in context, the same policy we're asking for them to actually pass, right, then compounds that full responsibility on a school that is completely already overcapacitated. So what we're saying is, right, a comprehensive, because an upstream strategy like a policy includes also the solutions that come with it. And what the Board of Education has to understand, just like the rest of Wilmington has to understand, that their lack of accessing community assets, community professionals, community-based organizations, people who are out there serving and connecting with these communities because they come from those communities, not accessing them and bringing them into the equation to support them, right, will continuously be the reason why they say, I can't pass a policy, right, to stop suspending 4, 5, 6, and 7 years old, because if I do that, I'm leaving those individuals inside of a classroom that's going to overwhelm the overall education of all other students. I've talked to the students. They say one child can actually disturb a teacher from focusing on all the other students. So if that's their rationale, right, of why we can't, what we want to say is that that rationale is not consistent, because we're telling you can if you access the resources that surround you, which is the community-based organizations and the communities to address these other issues.
And the funding that is available.
Well, so that's that piece right there. So the funding.
So we're
on the same page. Yeah. But I want to say that. So that what I want to say is
page.
that communication is still attempting to support Love Our Children's focus on the policy, but on the ground, listening and hearing.
Yes.
The thing that I understood was leaving that conversation to deaf ears was the fact that, I'm gonna tell you what it is, right? I've actually talked to teachers. A couple of them told me, like, really low key, to say it like in a sad type of way, like, if the child can't act right, then we have them have their parents go deal with them. So this is what happens. So if a teacher is saying, because if I deal with them, it's gonna take me away from teaching all the other children, right? So their mentality is not so much like, I wanna suspend them, right? But send them home to let the parents deal with them, right? And what I'm saying is that that's not okay either, although I understand that rationale. So the ideal is, as much as we push a policy, we also say too, here's this opportunity, right? Where all this money is available. I want this policy to pass. And I don't want you to tell me that you can't pass this policy because there's no other resources to support these students, to support these teachers in the school, because there is resources. Not only is there money, but there's community-based organizations. There's an actual model, community health workers. For instance, DC, I know you're going to get to your questions, but DC Virgo, right? DC Virgo back in 2017 with the Blue Ribbon Commission, I brought the model community health worker back into Wilmington. Sister Brenda Galloway, I was the first one hired in DC Virgo as a community health worker. You know what I'm saying? Principal Hillblack, right? You know what I'm saying? Allowed us to come in. Then we hired Sister Brenda Galloway. We sat in rooms, the multi-tiered support, what is it?
Support system, multi-tier support.
Multi-tier support system did what? It highlighted all the students inside the school that had the worst behavior. And then what they did is they assigned those students to community support, community health workers, to actually engage the students in activities before they entered into the room of any teacher. So for instance, they had activities inside of an actual, it was called the parent room, where these actual personalities, that was like, I'm talking about trend-setting personalities. Our young people are brilliant, right? They can be brilliant in positive ways and brilliant in negative ways. One student can shift the whole environment in the classroom.
Yes.
What we was trying to do is catch that student in an environment with their peers and say, use your genius to do something good. What's my point? That model was funded. DC Virgo funded CHWs. They call them community outreach advocates through the BRC. What I'm saying is that it's not like it hasn't been done. They have communities in schools right now, right? But this is the difference between community schools and what a community health worker do. Community health workers don't stay in schools, right? We go into the homes and support. So my point is, if we're pushing a policy that we're saying, stop sending our children away from the place they should be supported in most. And they're saying, well, what do you want us to do? We don't have capacity here. We're saying three things. You do have capacity because there's money. And when you get your money, don't just focus on teaching the children, teaching the students, the teachers to be more innovative in their education, right? Because no matter how much they educate, no matter how creative they get, if you have crisis that these children are coming from, it's called adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, trauma. Trauma looks like fight, flight, freeze, and appease, right? If I'm fighting, as soon as you tell me to do something, right, the way I'm going to actually reject that is going to be aggressive because the way that my brain is operating, right? So all we're saying is just to kind of the support, to say that we're supporting, we're definitely supporting is that everyone needs help. And this policy here, I believe, is the thing that can force their hand. Why? Because it's the most humane thing to do. And if they say that they can't do it, you say, no, you can. Because there's money for it, and guess what? There's untapped resources in this community that love their children, that's willing to come help you do what you need to do to make sure you don't have to kick our children out of schools and put them into prisons and put them into crisis. Sorry.
I wanted to, one line that you just said is the most humane thing to do with this policy. And so I just wanted to circle back on the previous two speakers. Ms. Galloway was giving us like all these issues that children are dealing with, and humans, like and adults, right? Like every adult has these, people get divorces, people lose their jobs, like life happens to adults. And of course, like children are also experiencing these things. So I think to Ms. Brenda's point about like what children are coming into school with, like these invisible things, are why there should be this humane and very sensical county-wide policy with our county school board.
Yes, it's raising the bar and the standard for keeping kids in school, but it also is a warranty, and that is that if you pass the policy, then every school in New Hanover County and every classroom, if a 5-year-old says you are a B, the policy will keep the child in school. You, as an individual school, can decide on what interventions, research-based, hopefully, that you're using to help the child get through that process. To help them know what to say the next time, what not to say the next time. But you're not kicking a 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-old child out of school, and they've done nothing violent. There are no drugs, there are no weapons, and they're saying no to you when you ask them to do something, and it's considered insubordination.
Right. Did you have something you wanted to?
Yes, I just want to say, all the things I said from the community, they bring that right back to the school, and just say we had a kid that had to get on the bus, stepped in the blood that was shed from a young man that was murdered the night before, and they're expected to perform, that's why they need more community health workers inside the school. They need a support system that can actually go to that child and reach that child and get to the core issues so they can be addressed. When they go to the social worker just says, how are you today? Well, why are you feeling like this today? That's nothing to a child that, for one, it's not comfortable. Don't feel safe talking to the social worker that's present. It matters. It mattered for me that I had Rita Shiver, somebody that looked like me, that could relate to some of the things that I was going through, and was interested and aware of what was going on in my community, and really knew and really cared. It's important. It's so vital. And that's where they get a warranty that the behaviors are going to change, because we are there inside and we are reaching out to these children, and these children come back to school and they're looking for me. They're looking for support systems that they know they're there. So it's just so vital that we remain there. And it's like the school system, it's like we're invisible. But like I said, UNCW and New Hanover, because of the success of our program at DC Virgo, they actually funded CHWs. You know, I had students that the school staff had said, you know what, they're lost. It's just nothing we could do with this one. This one's just not going to act right. This girl here, she's just going to fail. She's just fast. We're going to keep her out of school. She can come until 12 o'clock. Well, that didn't make sense for her to come and stay until 12 o'clock. And then they expect her to do well in all her studies. Well, she transferred to another school, and they said good riddance, but she became an A student in less than 60 days, you know, and I continue to foster her now, have that relationship with them, you know, and it matters that you keep a relationship. Children know their parents, they know their parents are always going to be there. They need to have trusted, positive adult relationships, because Miss Jane that's next door that's watching while I'm at work, it may not be a positive relationship. And children have to, they have to be exposed to positive adult relationships. They learn how to speak positively to adults. They learn how to interact. But they will interact in the way they know in their neighborhood. You know, they'll talk slang and cuss at you because it's become a social norm. It's normal for some.
I feel like the thing that's coming up in this conversation often is like humanity, right? And
yes.
like, if we think about systems like outside of education, if we think about labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when, there was a time before the 40-hour work week, where people were working to exhaustion.
Yes.
There was a time before, like, you know, this varies, but like the 8-hour day is pretty much the standard day, right? To make sure people are being taken care of. And so it, those launches or those progressions and like labor history happen because people are like, actually this is inhumane, the way that we're treating our people. And it sounds like this is like a call, like because our folks are hurting, because there's so much systemic oppression, we need to have systemic change that is broadly, in some ways, very uniform.
Absolutely.
But I did want to pose a question, Ms. Sidbury. I know that your boys are relatively young, 3 and 5. But yeah, I think that a lot of times patterns might show up early, and I'm curious to know if there are certain patterns that you're already seeing in your, as a mother, or if you're seeing any patterns in some of the young women that you mentor and you coach.
With my boys, as far as me seeing them every day, I'm not really seeing any patterns. I think it's more so it comes from home. And I try to raise them, you know, the best I can, teach them what's right, what's wrong. When you go to school, yeah, he gets some bad reports here and there. He's a child. And I think that's what society and definitely in the school system failed to realize. These are children.
Children, baby.
They're not adults. They're not teenagers. Their brains do not think like us. And definitely teaching at DC Virgo, it helped me to really realize that, because I teach K-8. I have kids 5 years old, 6 years old, 7-year-old, and one thing I love about DC Virgo is we don't kick kids out of school unless it's a really dying situation. We're more so, we do restorative circles, we talk to them, we bring them in. What's the issue? Let's talk about it. How can we help? And I know you said, like, if they're saying bad words, what can we do versus kick them out of school? We talk to them. We tell them why that was wrong, what we can do to make it better. What can we say next time? How can we not hurt our friends' families or feelings? And with the softball program, we are striving, yes, it's softball, it's a sport, it's after school, but we're striving to teach the kids life skill lessons. You can get that through sports. It don't have to necessarily be softball. But I grew up on softball my whole life. It taught me a lesson. It definitely taught me a lesson when my mom was like, look, your behavior was bad. You ain't playing this year. I realized, like, I don't want to sit out the whole season. But it taught me a lesson.
Yeah.
So I do see, you know, patterns with, like, girls who play sports and the boys who play sports and those who don't. And then I think the sports gives the kids an opportunity to look forward to something. I know I got to keep my grade at this level to play, or this grade to play this sport, and they look forward to something, and that helps with a lot of issues, behavioral. And for us, the little kids, there's Parks and Rec. There's travel ball, there's t-ball, there's wee ball now. We didn't have that when we grew up. Like 4-year-olds can play, ball, and they look forward to that. It gives them something to do so they're not in so much trouble. So that would be my take as a teacher, a mother, and a coach, Like, we have to keep these kids engaged.
Ms. Brenda mentioned earlier about a young woman who the school had given up on, and then when given the right attention, she became an A student. And I'm curious to know if there are instances, you mentioned like restorative circles, and you mentioned like talking out the motivations for why children are misbehaving. I'm curious to know if there are like success stories that really stick out in your mind with a child, or like situations with children that looked really difficult, but like given those interventions.
Right. When I got hired onto DC Virgo, one of the questions was similar to this. It was like, what did you do in a bad situation with a kid who was bad, and you just changed it? And my biggest motto for myself teaching is, you have to have a relationship and bond with these kids. And for me personally, coming into Virgo, I was like, oh, I got to act like you, but be the adult you. So the way my kids talk to me, I talk to them that way, and they respect it more than me always nagging and being down their throat. So I had a young kid, I was teaching dance, and he was like, oh, I don't want to do this. This is stupid. Why we got to do this in PE? And I was like, look, it's part of the curriculum, but we're going to do it fun. So what do you like to do? He's like, I like to do TikTok. So I took that TikTok dance and I made it educational. And before, when I tried it my way, I was like, okay, this is the 8 count, let's do this. They were bored, jumping in the bleachers, like hanging on the monkey bar. It was just crazy. But then when I took something they actually loved, TikTok, everybody was into it. All A's in the dance unit. It was like, oh, what are we doing tomorrow? Can we do this? And it just made me more of a better teacher, because I was like, oh, I actually can teach something that you guys love to do, but the way that you like to do it. So I definitely feel relationship bonding, that's key with kids. And it controls a lot of little minor behaviors.
Yes, it does.
And nothing breaks it more than throwing a kid out of school. A 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-old child.
I want to just check in and see if there are any questions from folks on Zoom or Facebook Live.
Yes, Lee Monroe asks, when are suspensions occurring, before or after census date? What percentage are Title I, special education, and or black?
So we know that disproportionately the African Americans are actually being suspended more than other populations. That's hands down, right? The other questions, I don't know, that would require, you should have sent that in via email. It requires some research.
The one thing I can say is that Julie Varnum, who's been presenting to the board, and she's also met with the NAACP and presented some data with her. And the data that she's using is the data from 2018 to 2019, which is the last full school year before the pandemic. And when you look at one of the things in that data, 40% of the children in elementary, of the 800, the almost 900 children, were suspended. They were 7 and under. So 40% of the 900 children
Was 7 and under.
Yes,
So it was in a category of the population of people we're talking about.
that we're talking about. And someone asked at the presentation that she did to the NAACP about the years that she was using, the 2018 to the 2019, and she said, well, we're using this data because the previous years all support it. So we're not, so we didn't go further back because they all support it. So there is a disproportionality to it. And when you break it down some more, you'll find out, I don't know the exact numbers, but a high percentage of those are males, totally. And then when you look for another higher degree, it'll be black males.
Black males, exactly. In proportion to also the population
Yes.
that's in attendance in school, in addition to the population in the city, period.
Yes.
It's like the disparity is ridiculous.
But if we can send some data to him and send that information. So I just happen to know who he is, so we'll send him that information.
So,
Are there any other questions?
oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's also a comment from, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Barbara Bakowitz.
Okay.
A couple of months ago, in a reply to my email about this policy, Hugh McManus said this: EDI is actually working on this. There is a question of what teachers and administrators will do with students once suspensions are stopped. If it does away with one issue and it creates another one. I am hearing from staff the question of where does a student go who needs to be removed from the class but not suspended. This was my reply to him. Quote, it brings to mind the detention methods used years back, still in school in a classroom, but learning. These days, adding intervention from a trained counselor for problem solving and guidance as well. I don't see how a positive outcome is achieved that's a win-win on many levels by implementing draconian measures. Parents of low and middle income cannot afford to jeopardize their jobs in order to stay home with a child whose schoolwork has been interrupted. It's the start of a disturbing negative cycle, making it difficult to get back on track. When there's a problem, it brings to mind what my work superiors and school professors would say. Find a solution, make it happen. I learned to instill that to the nursing students and new graduates I was mentoring. I cannot believe that a compassionate alternative solution can't be achieved if there's a collaborative thinking outside the box.
And I would add that collaborative thinking, but again, so if there's additional training for the teachers, who I think do an amazing job, right, they require funding. If there's fidelity checks on whether or not the teachers are securing what the expectations should be, there's funding for that, right? If there's additional support that's needed, I'll give you an example of a family that actually was able to secure the position of a CHW. And again, we say CHW just represents a community asset, a community member that's hired to actually use their relationships in the community to support community members in navigating education, housing, criminal justice system. They're called social determinants, these factors that can hurt people or can help people. CHWs are actually hired to help these people navigate that because they're in crisis, right? And it's because of historical trauma, it's because of historical racism that they're in crisis, right? So they're hired to support that. One example, had a young man, right, who kept getting into conflicts with the teachers, like physical fights with the teachers. Come to find out, his mother, right, the social workers went down, and this is at DC Virgo, right, the social workers went down there, and the conversation they was having was around literally removing this young man and his sisters away from the mother, who was literally on the verge of actually being incarcerated for truancy. So they couldn't access the home, right? So I actually went to the location, caught the young man outside, talked to him a little bit, and this was my conversation with him. Like, bro, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I know that is you're taking on the responsibility. I'm watching him literally take on the responsibility with his sisters. He's telling me on a regular basis that, you know, saying, I'm having to do this for my sister. I'm having to do this for my sister. So I'm thinking to myself, that's a lot that he's doing that a parent should be doing. So when I come to the home, I'm able to tell him, I know you're doing a lot. I don't know what's happening here, but I'm telling you, there's people getting ready to come to your home, right? And if they misunderstand what's happening here, they're going to take your family away from you, right? Let me talk to your mama. I got a chance to talk to the mama. Mama dealing with diabetes and obesity, right? Mama literally is not able to actually get the young girls up, you know what I'm saying, to go to school, not able to actually even bathe the children. So the children don't want to go to school on their own. The only reason that they're not going to school is because they're not getting the proper support from the mother who's having actual health issues. Literally, something as simple as that, right? And there's a dog living in the house. About to lose their house, about to lose their children, and the young man's getting ready to get completely out of school. Simple fix. Have a conversation. Not simple. I'm going to say it's simple. Have a conversation. Where's your network at? Where's your resources at? I don't have any. Are you sure? Is anybody else around? Well, I have a father that lives such and such. We're not on good terms. Like, okay, but your situation is really intense, right? Can I give that father a phone call? Just give me his number. Nothing. You may not be on good terms with him, right? But let me call him. Make a phone call to the father who lives, you know what I'm saying, up north. Explains to him the situation, right? Young girls are able to return and go to the father, the actual father of the grandfather, for like 2 months. The young man remains with his mama. They move out. We get them support, housing support, right, from community-based organization, right? We interact with Hill Black and the rest of the school, and we say, listen, next time a young man has a problem, give me a call.
Okay. I want to.
When we finish, though, it's important, though, because it's going to wrap all the way back around full circle, because, again, we want to understand that, so trauma begets trauma. We did a training for 2 days at DC Virgo, helping teachers teaching teachers how to manage stress inside their actual classrooms. And the number one thing we heard from all the children is that I'm overstressed. I'm overwhelmed, right? I'm doing too much, right? And if you have that going on inside the actual schools, and you have these children coming into those environments with that actual trauma, right? It's almost a form of inhumanity, right, to ask them to take on even more, because that's when mistakes get made on a more severe level, right? People lose their jobs, right? People begin to do things that they shouldn't be doing, right? So I'm just make the connection is that, because the reason I want to say this, because one thing I want to make sure we understand is this: the solution has to be comprehensive, and I believe that the ending of suspensions, because it's the most humane thing to do, it's the most rational thing to do. And it's that thing that makes people wonder, my God, why are we not doing that? Like, it makes a person say to himself, like, are we really suspending 4, 5, 6, 7 years old? Like, are we really doing that? Like, at the numbers that we're saying? But when you begin to probe and say why, all the other situations make you say, okay, we can't change that, just like she just gave a mention to, right? Until we actually place something to be able to support it. Or if not, you can cause a crisis even worse than what it is now. So what I want to bring to the context for the people that's listening, because what you want to have an argument. You want to be able to go say, I need this, right? And I understand what you're going to say. There's no funding, there is funding. I understand you can say, well, funding is not everything you need. There is additional support. There's community support. So I want to give this story real quick, right? So the young man gets into a confrontation with his teacher. And the teacher gets upset. He has a history on record, as well as in the classroom, of being violent. So what did the teacher do? School resource officer. Calls the school resource officer. School resource officer comes in. As soon as the child sees that she already called the school resource officer, by the time the school resource SRO gets there, he's super amped up. School resource officer goes over there, grabs him. They get into an altercation. Young man gets suspended for 2 weeks. You know where he spends his suspension at? With me. I took the young man to the actual chief of police. I took the young man to 2 different doctors. I took the young man to actual 2 different community centers. His time spent with me was going out, interacting, and seeing that the whole world was in front of him. And I had him write a report. Go back to Miss Hill Black and request to return back to school early based off the actual educational experience that he experienced, and what he seen was now his actual potential. So next time he actually getting upset, he's thinking about, not only can I cause my mama to go to jail, right? But I can also inhibit myself from experiencing the world. This is an example, right? And the end result of that, he returned back to school. Eventually, his mother was able to get housing inside the city. The 3 children came back into the home, and the family was stabilized. But most importantly, the young man graduated from DC Virgo and went to New Hanover and was able to play soccer and became well known. He's moved since then. This is my point. Comprehensive, because we're dealing with trauma. And if we don't understand that right now inside of Wilmington, other than 3-4 years ago on the north side, right there where DC Virgo was at, they were saying that average household income for an average family on the north side of Wilmington, North Carolina was $14,500 for 3 to 5 people living inside a house. $14,500 for 3 to 5 people living in the house. Poverty, I think Martin Luther King and Gandhi said it. The worst form of violence is what? Poverty. Right? So all I'm saying is this, as we talk about this scenario, right? I'm saying being very clear to the audience that the most humane thing to do is to support loving our children to end these suspensions. You're going to get rebuttal though. Don't let someone tell you that there's no support for the teachers, because there's support. There's 1-point-something billion getting ready to be allocated. There's 650 million, I think 225 million of that money coming from HOP addresses support to actual children in their homes, housing, transportation, food, and interpersonal violence. And there's other millions of dollars that's out there. So don't let them tell you that they can't do this policy because there's no support for the actual teachers. There's money there for them. And the last thing I'll say, and you guys have the rest of it, I promise you, because this is important, is that right now there's a report getting ready to be put out there right now in response to the school shooting that took place, where individuals came together and said that they was going to come up with a comprehensive strategy. Do you understand that their comprehensive strategy to deal with actual violence in the schools looked like reinvesting back in county assets? Majority of their intervention is putting money back into county assets. This is an actual historical pattern of inequities that looks like ignoring the actual assets and the actual benefit that community members offer to the problem. You do what you do right now today, Ms. Veronica, because you come from the community. You understand this situation. You're connected to this situation, right? In the same way that you do it, understand me, there's people on the ground that's actually breaking their backs to get access to these children in these schools to help them. But there's nobody willing to let them in. So when this money comes out, community assets, and don't tell me no more you don't have an actual support for the school, because we know there's money there. All you're asking is end the suspensions, and you have no more excuses.
So I just want to check back in and see if there are other questions, but Ms. Veronica.
No, I would just want to share a conversation I had with two principals, and that would have been this month. And one, I asked, I've known her for 30 or 40 years. I knew her as a teacher. And I asked, will you tell me, what do you think about our advocacy? What we're asking? And she said, suspension is not a thing here. We're committed to keeping our kids in our school. And I said, but if we pass the policy, what additional resources? She says, we don't need any additional resources. We got additional resources from the ARP money, and we're good. I talked to another principal, and she realized, when we were talking, she said, I understand. You're not talking about failed schools, you're talking about a policy, a standard for every school. I get it. I said, what would it take for you to support this policy? And she said, we need some teacher assistants. So we know that they need additional resources to support this policy. But at this point, how do you as adults know that something hurts children? Not just for the short term, but impacts their entire quality of life. It impacts their mental health when they're adults. It impacts their ability to have a job when they're adults. It impacts not just everything they do, but everything that happens to their children. And we're talking about creating generational poverty by suspending these children. It's an upstream strategy. We have a duty, we have a legal responsibility, an ethical responsibility, and then during this month of December, if you have any faith, you have a faith-based responsibility to change it, to know because we have enough research that tells us the harm is done. And so yes, the question is, our responsibility is to change the policy, change it now, start the new school year with a changed policy. You have the summer, you have the rest of this year to bring people together, because many teachers and schools and principals are doing this already. We have a lot of policies and practices that are research-based, such as restorative justice, positive behavior intervention, social emotional learning, trauma center schools,
Sister,
training in methods.
So you saying that, though, but honestly, though, working in the schools, like those young kids, like, man, like listen to me. Our young kids, young black kids, whatnot,
Yes.
they're not connecting with their teachers.
But-
Their teacher,
Yeah,
they're
but
not
then
connecting.
we need to do that.
No, I'm saying no. Even
I
outside.
want to take it back because
Okay.
there's some other voices that we're not hearing from as much, and I want to make sure we do.
Yes.
Okay.
And I am gonna close this out and ask folks for like 2 or 3 lines that they
Okay.
want to make a point on. But I do want to pose a question to Ms. Sidbury and then to Ms. Galloway. Ms. Sidbury, Ms. Galloway, the same question, and I'll ask you first.
Okay.
What would be possible for our children? Can you paint a picture? What would be possible for our children if they got the resources, the interventions, the care, the emotional intelligence that they need from their educators and their community?
I definitely think if we get the supports they need, these kids will go beyond. And I say that because we kind of do it a little bit at my school right now. And it takes a child who was angry, came into school angry about something, causing a stir up, and getting out of class to talk about it, to vent about it. They come back and they're a total different child. Never even knew something happened because they're positive now. They just needed that 10 minutes to just get out. And I just think if we had the opportunity, had the support, I mean, I didn't even know 4 or 5-year-old kids get kicked out of school. I mean, at that age, what are you kicking a kid out of school for? They're kids, again. But if we had that support, it gives the kids something to look for, and just the motivation. You teach them something, you have them self-learn it or hands-on, and have them teach it to others. I mean, I don't know. I'm just about positivity, and if a kid gets that support they need in that positive environment, they're gonna go with it. They're gonna have something to look forward to share to the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Galloway, I'll ask you the same question. What would be possible for our children in New Hanover County if they were met with the resources, the care, the planning, the intervention, the emotional intelligence that they deserve?
Well, if they got all the assistance that they deserve, they would be able to see their potential. Because now they don't see their potential.
Yes, ma'am.
They hear what others say they could do, or what's lined up for them, but they need to know within themselves, I can do this. Why? Because somebody cares enough to help me. I have some ongoing support. I don't know about you, but when I was coming up, our parents were able to visit the school, and that was a regular thing. That was the normal thing. Parents on lunchtime at France Nick, where they visited Mary Washington Howe or Gregory on their lunch breaks. Right now, if you see parents come to school, it's a highlight, not only for that student, for the classroom. They're excited that somebody's dad or auntie, grandmama, somebody came to visit. That's so important that you have community members inside of the school that can actually get to core issues so that children can, they need to talk it out sometime. And sometimes at schools, you can give them that 10 minutes, but they really have no one to talk it out with. Because we don't ask, well, what are you feeling? Well, what's going on? We just tell them what you need to do to get back in that classroom and behave. But the child has not had an opportunity to express themselves. So we really don't have the core issue. But what I would like children to do is to see their potential, because they will grow. They will grow, and like you say, have the world to look forward to. Because they'll know beyond a shadow of a doubt, somebody's got their back.
Right, absolutely. And we should all know that, right?
Yes,
Especially children.
yes.
Ms. Veronica, I want to pose this question to you. Folks who are listening, folks who will watch this after tonight, if there were one call to action that you want folks to really understand that they can mobilize around, that they can work to support, what would that call to action be?
Well, it's hard to say one, but I'm going to ask a question. Do we have the anything that they're seeing about the strategic plan survey?
Yeah.
Well, what I would say is that what our call to action is posted. And we want you to complete the strategic plan survey. It shows that you can go online. There's a question 8, and it's about suspensions. And it's very important that you check that suspensions are important, and also that if you have time, please write in suspensions for 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-old children in pre-K to 2nd grade, except for weapons or drugs or seriously bodily harm in the first box. It'll be so, because if you do that and we have enough people who check that box, we have documented and we communicated to this school board and the superintendent and his staff that suspensions are important to this community, and we want them to end, especially for our 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-old children. It's sheer madness that we were, as Mrs. Galloway said, they're babies. I mean, she has a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'm sure she can't imagine her 5-year-old. Mrs. Sidbury, I'm sorry.
I wish I would.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. I was
Be like,
because it's just madness to think that we were sending 5-year-olds home for saying like no and calling it disrespect and subordination. I think one of the things when we say that, people can't believe it, but I actually know a parent who got called off her job because her 4-year-old was saying no. And the mother said she got there and said, well, that's what 4-year-olds do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we are at 7:02. I will do one last round with our folks just to make sure, if you have any final thoughts, you can share those final thoughts, as well as you can tell people where to find your work. So we'll start with you, Ms. Galloway, and I'll ask, where can folks find out more about HOPE? Or how can folks find out more about HOPE? And do you have any final thoughts on this school about, on this topic about suspensions for 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds?
Okay. On the suspensions for our 4 through 7-year-olds, yes, it is a bit ridiculous. And my vote is in. I'm going to check the box. I do realize that some of the schools don't want community members in because you actually get a full view of how they are navigating, trying to put their best foot forward to manage a whole population of children, you know, and when we come inside, it's challenging for them, but we need to be there because children that go to suspension or the children that have issues, my thing is they have to be addressed. And if they're not addressed, they won't be successful, you know, in moving forward.
Thank you.
And HOPE is helping others proceed effectively. It's a collaboration with other community-based organizations to provide resources and meet unmet needs in our community with our youth and families. I'm usually here in and out at the Dakota House. My website is in development stages right now because I really had to take a shift on my mission.
Yeah. But folks can find out more about your program if they see you here. They visit you
Yes,
at the
if they
clubhouse.
visit me here, we have a lot of activities going on. So yes, right here at Sakota House.
Thank you. Brother Abdullah, if you could share any last thoughts that you have regarding the out-of-school suspensions, and then how folks can find out more about Quality Life Blueprint and the work of Sakota House.
Absolutely. So I think everybody pretty much that's paying attention know how to locate us, SakotaHouse.org. And all I'm going to say is that we live inside of a social ecology, right? Nothing exists within a silo, no matter what individuals have actually taught to educate us as. Education doesn't interact separate from social services, law, from food, from housing. It's all connected when it comes to the human being. And the humane thing regarding this policy is to pass it. But also what's humane is to understand that at the time and moment that we're in, where the money is available, understand me, there's not gonna be no time inside of history, inside of Wilmington, in this city, in this county, again, you will have this much money on the table to address the crisis of populations of people that's been historically oppressed inside these lands, right? And if you didn't know, I'm just gonna remind you what your county officials have already said to you, and you should not forget what they've actually said officially. 238 counties and municipalities across the country declare racism, systemic racism, a public health crisis. This county did the same thing. And when I think about suspensions, across the board, yeah, that matters to me very much. But I know those children that's being suspended the most are people that look like me. And if they're not being suspended, then they're actually being passed from one grade to the next grade, not getting the proper actual education and care that they need because they don't want to be dealt with because the teachers are overwhelmed. But what did our county say? They said that racism is a socially transmitted disease passed down through generations, leading to inequities observed in our population today. And racism has produced and perpetuates poverty through intentional and unintentional policies that create barriers to economic mobility, and is a social system with multiple dimensions. Individual racism that is internalized or interpersonal, and systemic racism that is institutional or structural. Yeah, in the suspensions, but comprehensively, right? Take advantage of the opportunity to take these resources that's out here and prioritize a comprehensive strategy to support increasing education, specifically for those populations in those geographical locations that have been historically neglected and disregarded. And that's the issue at hand. That's why Sakota House is involved. It's because the people that's being suspended are young kids that look like us on every day, right? And it's been happening and it's going to continue to happen. Other than that, we support it, man. You support it as well.
Thank you. Ms. Sidbury, final thoughts on the out-of-school suspension issue, and then also where can folks find your work at That Power Game?
Okay, so yes, you can find my work at thatpowergame.com. It is a softball organization, but as I said earlier, we are working with kids all ages to build their self-esteem, their self-confidence, their skills that they can use not just in sports, but outside in the community. And as far as the suspensions, I definitely agree with what everyone said here tonight. Actually, I really don't have any more words to say about it, but I support it, and I put myself in the shoes of these parents whose kids are getting suspended, because I could not imagine my 5-year-old coming home from kindergarten and saying he got suspended because he did something that he does at home, which is what happens a lot of places. They do it at home, and then they go to school and think it's okay, and then you're suspending them. But again, my biggest thing is let kids be kids. We were kids before, we did things that we probably shouldn't have. And just imagine us getting suspended. Think about, high-notch people, presidents, everybody. We all did stuff we should not have done. How would you feel if that was you being suspended or sent home? And I always, in everything I do, I think about putting myself in those shoes. Did I do that? Yes. Did I tell my mom no? Sometimes she might have knocked my teeth out, but I did. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely support the suspension policy of not suspending the kids, and definitely getting kids engaged. So, with our softball program, that's what we're here for. We're here to not only better their skills, but give them something to do, after school that they have forward to looking, they have to look forward to as they get older. So definitely check out the website, That Power Game. We offer lessons. Even if you don't know how to play softball at all, we'll teach you, just to give you something to do. And I mean, growing up in school and playing it throughout school, and definitely middle, high school, all the way up to college, it makes you better. It made me better for sure in life, and I definitely use some of my skills in softball to personal life. So yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Veronica, we'll give you the last word. Where can we find the work of Love Our Children? And also any last points that you want to make on the issue?
Well, one of the things, Love Our Children is a single issue organization. We like to describe ourselves as the ant taking a bite out of elephant, because all the things we talked about is that elephant in the room that we've been dealing with for years, centuries, you might even say. But we're there trying to take that one bite, and that one bite is to change the policy and we know that changing that policy and providing the resources so that it can be effective will impact instantly every child in New Hanover County in a positive way. And it also is something that helps everybody. It helps the principal. It helps the teacher. It helps the parents. It helps our community not have to deal with all the violence. You do the kindergarten teacher who stops suspending children, the benefit of that goes straight to the 12th grade teacher. This is something that is a no-brainer. It's indefensible that we are suspending children, 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, and it needs to stop now. We need to care about our children. And I would say this is December. Give a gift to a child that keeps on giving. Go on the line, sign the petition, try to get your organization to do a resolution, come to the board meetings, and please go online and for the strategic plan and check suspensions are important. Again, if you want to give a real gift and a gift that matters to a child this season, support ending suspensions. That will be a gift that gives on giving all of his life and all of the generations following him.
Beautiful. And if folks wanted to find you on social media or on a website, is that available?
I forgot that part. Yes, love-our-children.com. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists,
Thank
for
you,
your
Ashley.
energy, expertise, and your heart to the issue. And thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.